Hey everyone, it's Stephanie from Little Cookie Co. Come join me as I walk you through my process of how I do a set of cookies. So we start off by baking our cookies. So I always plan to do this about a Sunday evening, maybe Monday, depending on how many cookies I have to do. This set is actually 60 cookies. It was for an engagement party for a close family friend. So I usually bake for the week on Sunday nights. It's kind of, a day off for me, off my day job. At the end, I'll share how long it actually took me for this whole order from start to finish. And I'll give you some tips on pricing and how much I would have made if I did charge for these cookies. So first things first is I have to know how many cookies I'm going to make, how many my batch usually makes, and kind of plan my time out in advance. So here it's Sunday, I'm baking my cookies. It's my least favorite part, making the dough and rolling the cookies. So I like to do it in advance, not to stress myself out for the week. So this batch was a little bit different because it was 60 cookies, and I had a feeling that my double batch of dough that I normally make wouldn't be enough. So I gave myself an extra day just in case that if I had to make another batch of dough, I would still have time. So normally I make a double batch because I would rather have extra dough than not enough, because I find it takes a long time to make the dough, especially roll it out. So I'd rather do that all in one shot than break it up and have to do, 2 single batches, one back to back, or, one night, one batch, and then the next night, the next batch. It's been a while since I've done a big set like this, and so I wanted to make it really special. And I always plan to make 1 or 2 extra cookies. Sometimes when I get down to it and get decorating and everything goes well, I might not decorate it those 1 or 2 last cookies, but I always like to bake a few extra just in case I have any mishaps, or you drop one or you break one or something happens down the line. Or you always have a test cookie too to make sure that the dough and everything tastes fine, especially if you're giving it to clients. So a couple of tricks that I learned along the way that helped me save some time was to get bigger cookie sheets to bake on. I used to have smaller sheets that could only fit maybe about 9 cookies or so, and just having bigger ones that could fit 12 or more cookies, it really, really saves a lot of time. I could have squeezed a lot more. This was the first batch, and I figured, I don't have time to bake, 10 to 15 minutes each tray, so I ended up squishing a lot more on the tray, and then it went a little bit faster, which was great. So unfortunately, I ran out of dough and I didn't have enough to make all the cookies. So the second night, I did actually have to remake a little bit of dough and cut some more cookies and bake them. But we're going to count that as one day because normally I can do most of them in one night. So after I bake my cookies, I usually either like to put them in a container or I like to put them in Ziploc freezer bags. And it kind of just keeps them fresh overnight. Of course, you want to make sure they're cooled completely before you do that. All right, so here we are. It's Tuesday night. Now we're making icing at 9 o'clock at night. So again, I like to always do baking one day and icing another day. It really is up to you the way you do it, but I find this with my schedule, it works the best, and I decorate the best when everybody's asleep and I have quiet and nobody's kind of talking and disturbing me running around the house. So this is kind of the way that I work. You kind of just find your zone and go with it. So making the actual icing doesn't take too long. That's the easy part. The hard part is coloring and making the consistencies. So thankfully, I didn't have to color this icing. They wanted it white, which is great. But I did take a while to make the consistency. It took me about 45 minutes to get the right consistency because I did a lot of flood at one time. And so I kept having to add water, and I don't want to overwater my icing when I'm making my flood, so I always have to put a little bit at a time. So it does take a process of mixing it in, seeing how it is, how much more water I can add. It does take a long time if you have to make several colors and, several consistencies of those colors, or you have to make flood in, 3, 4, 5 colors. That also takes a really long time. It's taken me, 2-3 hours to get all my consistencies ready. That is something that you need to factor in when you're decorating as well, is how many colors you're doing, how many consistencies you need if you're writing and you're flooding and you're doing flowers, or certain details that needed stiffer icing, an outline or a flood. And even though I've done this so many times, there's no real way to speed it up. I kind of just eyeball it and go with it. But when I'm making multiple colors, I'll let them sit on the counter, the bubbles rise. And so it kind of works out the way I do it. And here you go, I had this huge bowl of icing. I put most of my icing in here to make the flood because I know I'd need a lot. And I was hoping that this batch would cover all the cookies. And luckily it did. So that was a good sign. So continuing on my Tuesday night here, after I made my consistencies, my goal is to outline all my cookies and flood them. So again, it's only one color, so it's nice and simple. Same shape, same design, which is kind of good because it's all going quickly. You know exactly what you need to do. So I'm just getting my bags ready and everything ready to go. If I can get this done all in one night, then that's great and it sets me up good for the next day. You always make sure to test your icing on a paper towel, see if the tip is good enough for you, if you need to cut it a little bigger, if I cut it too big. So here I just have my cookies laid out nice and evenly. These are my dehydrator trays, these little gray trays, they're plastic. I use my dehydrator to dry my cookies faster. So here I just have them set up. I have 2 rows kind of facing downwards and then the other row facing the other way because I'll flip my tray halfway through because it's kind of hard to reach over to the top cookie. Sometimes I get my hand, in the icing and I'll mess up my outline or my flood. So I kind of like to face them one way. Some people can decorate designs upside down. It doesn't really matter which way you go, but for some reason with these hearts, it's easier when it's facing me. So again, if you don't have a dehydrator tray or something like this, before I had one, I used to decorate them on cookie sheets or on the cooling racks as well. And when I was a beginner, I used to do one by one. So I would take one cookie, put it in front of me, slowly outline it, put it back. When I was done all the outlines, again, I would take the cookie, bring it towards me, flood the cookie, put it back on the cooling rack, and then take the next one. But when you're doing really big sets, sometimes it's a lot more time consuming to do one by one. So laying them all out on the tray like this really helps to go faster. It does take some practice because if you're used to piping really close to your body or kind of having your head above the cookies and you're piping a little bit further away, it's a little bit different, awkward. So if you get used to it, but it goes a lot faster because you can kind of do one by one. Make sure you build that into your price. If you're really, putting a lot of effort into it, make sure you're charging your worth for your cookies. If you're doing this as a business, try to make sure you factor those things into your prices. So my goal is once everything's all outlined, I always let my outline dry and then I go in and flood. And same thing, I'm starting with the middle row here. It's just easier to start from that row so I'm not getting in my way. And just one at a time, I just flood them. I keep them on the tray so I'm not moving things on and off. And once I flooded the whole tray, I'll carefully put it back in the dehydrator. We don't want to start moving it too much because the first few cookies will probably start already drying a little bit. This consistency is actually a little bit thicker than I normally use. And I actually had to go in and use my scribe on every single cookie to make sure that that consistency melts in together. Now, normally my floods kind of melt by themselves. I don't really have to use my scribe, but because I was kind of rushing this and I had so many I was doing at the same time, I really didn't want them to spill over the side because sometimes when I make my flood a little bit looser, they tend to spill over the edge if I put too much. So I wanted them nice and thick layer of icing, but without spilling over. So I made it a bit on the thicker side. But again, to save time when you're doing orders, if you have multiple orders, then you kind of want to make sure that your flood's a little bit looser and it will settle on its own. That way you don't have to take that extra 30 seconds, 45 seconds on each cookie to smooth out your flood. all those little things kind of add up on your time. And so these little tricks will make it easier and faster if you're starting up your business or you want to make more cookies during the week. And all those little tricks save you lots of time in the end when you're doing, 50 or 100 or more cookies a week. So here I'm just working left to right, and I started kind of in that middle row and then working down to the bottom corner, trying not to get my hands smudging any of the cookie icing. And then I'll flip the tray and I'll do those top ones that I left before. And this is much faster than, like I said, when I usually take one cookie at a time and do it that way. So in goes one tray, it's done, into my dehydrator and on to the next. So that's 9 cookies down flooded, bunch more to go. So to speed up also the drying process, you can use a fan as well. If you don't have a dehydrator, a fan's a great way. Again, it's a trick that I used before I bought one, and it works to speed up the drying process. So if you want to do the next steps, you can go ahead and do it, sooner than you would have to just wait for it to air dry. Make sure your fan setting is not too high because you don't want to blow the icing and kind of move it. It might end up drying ripply. So just put it on a low setting, kind of nearby your cookies just to get some airflow, and that's all you need. This is day 3, and now we're going to work on the details. Now, because this is only simple, one color, just writing, I'm going to try and do them all in one night, but normally I like to give myself 2, maybe 3 days for details if there's lots of layers or different colors to do. So in my head, when I was kind of planning this, I was like, yeah, no problem. I like writing. It's pretty quick. Do a couple practice runs. It's all the same, writing on each cookie. Should go pretty smooth and pretty quick. Never does, so it took a lot longer than I actually planned for. In case you're looking for the projector I'm using, super easy and quick to use, I'll leave the link in the description below the video. Just finding the right font took an hour or more maybe, but I kind of had a specific font that they wanted, so I had to make sure that I could find that font, because the cookie that they showed or the example that they showed wasn't the right letters. And so it took me a while and playing around, cutting and pasting a little bit to get the letters kind of in the right spot with the heart. So all in all, it took about an hour and a half to find the right font and to get my font kind of in the right spots with the heart and the right distance between. This is kind of pressure piping writing, so it takes a little bit longer. I need to go nice and slow. And I really didn't want to mess up. I really wanted to make this detail perfect. So I took my time with it. And the writing actually took me 4.5 hours for 60 cookies. Because this is thicker icing, and by the time I got done 62 cookies over 4 hours, most of the cookie writing was dry. By the end of it, I could paint the little heart a champagne color, and that took about 30 minutes. That went pretty quick because it's just a minor detail and it was pretty simple to paint. Again, I just laid them all out on my tray and I painted it all at once, and it was super fast. Versus when I'm writing, I'm doing one cookie at a time because I have to put them under the projector. That had to be done one by one, so that was kind of the long process, and then the painting was just kind of nice and quick, and that was the end of my Wednesday night. And this is packaging day. Now, I always like to package one day before pickup because I just want everything to be ready. Usually pickups for my order will happen on, the Friday night or Saturday morning. Most of the events were held on Saturday, so some people didn't want to come the morning, so the day before is much easier for them to set up. So here I wanted to bag everything today so that when tomorrow one is picked up, everything was ready, didn't have to stress, and I was happy. And if anything goes wrong, I always have a little bit of time to fix anything. If something didn't work out, like I ran out of ribbon, I can get some more or something, just sometimes things happen last minute and it's better to give yourself more time. I'm not worried about the freshness because once they're in bags too, it's no problem. It's heat sealed, it's nice and fresh. They've only been out for a few days. The other days they were in containers or Ziploc bags, or they're in these bags that I give to the client. So the cookies stay nice and fresh. So bagging is pretty quick. I put them in the middle, make sure sometimes, the cookies go in crooked, so you got to fix it up a little bit. But overall, heat sealing is not that time consuming, but tying ribbons definitely is. So tying ribbons and bagging 60 cookies took me about 3.5 hours. A lot longer than I thought, but If you can, watch a TV show or put something on your phone. Watch my YouTube tutorials. That's always a great way to kind of pass the time while you're doing things like this. And you can buy pre-tied bows like on Amazon or other stores. So I've kind of let you know how long each process has taken me. So any guesses on how long it took me in total? Well, if you guessed almost 20 hours, you'd be correct, which means that's about 3 cookies per hour. So if you think about it, if I'm charging $3 a cookie, I'm making $9 an hour. Where I'm from, minimum wage is almost $17 an hour. So $3 a cookie is not making very much money, especially considering I have to pay for my supplies and my ingredients as well. So there's a lot of things that go into factoring the pricing of your cookies and how much detail, and if you're going to be bagging them and doing all the extra steps. So make sure you factor those into your prices. And of course, it depends on your area as well, what the prices are, how much people usually pay, what the standard cost is for things as well. I hope you enjoyed the process. Everyone loved the cookies, so I hope you guys also loved the video, and we'll see you in the next one. Happy baking!